Millionaire CEO rejected by 20 women on blind dates. Only the poor miner girl said yes and changed his life. The rain tapped against the cafe window as Marcus stared at the empty seat across from him. 20 blind dates. 20 women who walked away the moment they learned he was unemployed. He exhaled, ready to give up. Until the door burst open. She stumbled inside, breathless, dirt smudged across her cheek, her hand still shaking from the cave-in she'd barely escaped. And then she smiled. "Sorry I'm late. Are you Mike?" That was the moment everything changed. The steady hum of Dallas traffic faded into the background as Marcus Chen sat in the small corner cafe, watching the minutes slip by. His eyes lingered on the empty chair across from him, the untouched second cup of coffee growing cold. 20 blind dates. 20 women who had smiled politely, asked a few obligatory questions, and then vanished the moment they heard what he did for a living. Or rather, what he pretended he did. Marcus adjusted the cheap flannel shirt that scratched against his neck, courtesy of James, his assistant, who had insisted he dress believably broke. It was part of the plan, his brilliant, foolish, exhausting plan, to finally find someone who loved him for who he was, not for the weight of his last name or the numbers in his bank account. Mike Santos, unemployed construction worker. That was the role he played. And he was ready to give up. "This has to be the worst idea I've ever had," Marcus muttered under his breath, running a hand through his intentionally messy hair. He stared at his reflection in the window, a man who could command boardrooms and sign billion-dollar deals, now humbled by 20 straight rejections. He exhaled and reached for his wallet to pay for yet another lonely coffee, when the door to the cafe suddenly flew open. The little bell above the door chimed sharply as a woman stumbled inside, nearly tripping over her own boots. She was completely out of breath, cheeks flushed, hair wild and damp with sweat. A smear of dirt crossed one side of her face, and her clothes were stained and dusty, as if she'd just crawled out of the ground. "Is there a Mike here?" she asked, scanning the cafe with wide brown eyes. Marcus blinked. He slowly raised his hand. I'm... Her shoulders relaxed in relief as she made her way over. "Sophia Mendes. I'm so sorry I'm late. We had a cave-in at the site. One of the gallery walls collapsed just as I was leaving. Good thing I'm short. I managed to crawl under it." Marcus stood, unsure whether to offer his hand or help wipe the dirt off her sleeve. She seemed completely unfazed by the mess she carried with her. "You're okay?" he asked. "Of course." She smiled and waved it off, spraying a few specks of dirt into the air. "Comes with the job. But wow, this is a fancy place. Are you sure you can afford it?" "I can pay for mine, no problem." The words hit Marcus harder than any of the rehearsed lines from the last 20 dates. She didn't flinch. She didn't hesitate. She wasn't calculating anything. He managed a soft laugh. "No, I can handle 2 coffees." "You sure?" She tilted her head. "I've lived off instant noodles for months before. You don't have to impress me." Sophia walked up to the counter herself, leaving Marcus watching her in quiet awe. She greeted the barista by name, asked about his son's asthma, and left a generous tip despite obviously counting every penny in her wallet. When she returned with the 2 cups, Marcus found himself completely disarmed. "So," Sophia smiled as she sat down, wiping her hands on her jeans, "what do you do, Mike, besides being between jobs right now?" Marcus swallowed, the familiar weight of his lie pressing down again. But her question wasn't filled with judgment, just genuine curiosity. "I worked construction, but I'm rethinking some things lately," he said carefully. "That makes sense," Sophia nodded, sipping her coffee. "Sometimes life forces you to pause. My dad used to say, when one tunnel collapses, you dig another path." He was a prospector too. Marcus noticed the softness in her voice as she spoke of her father. "I'm sorry." Sophia smiled faintly. "Thanks. He passed away 5 years ago, but he taught me something important. Never judge people by what they have. Judge them by how they carry what they've been given." Marcus felt something shift deep inside him, a part of him cracking open in a way it hadn't for years. The lies, the charades, the weight of his public life, it all felt strangely distant now. "And you took over the family business?" he asked. She laughed softly. "Sort of. Most people thought I wouldn't last a week out there. But I worked harder than anyone else. I learned to fix the equipment, balance the books, and, well, I make a mean lasagna that wins over the toughest miners. For the first time in months, Marcus laughed. Really laughed. What else can you do? He teased. Sophia playfully counted on her fingers. I can imitate birds, make origami out of napkins, name every world capital, and, oh, I have a grandma who's basically the FBI when it comes to investigating my love life. Marcus grinned. Sounds like your grandma and my assistant, James, would get along. They talked for over 2 hours, the kind of conversation that doesn't feel scripted or performative. Stories about mining disasters, funny small-town gossip, Sophia's dreams to modernize her father's mining operation and bring new jobs to her struggling community. When the conversation slowed, Sophia looked at him, her gaze warm and unguarded. You're different, Mike. Different how? Most guys talk about what they want to own. You ask about things that matter. Marcus smiled, his heart racing in a way he hadn't felt in years. Maybe that's because you're one of the few people I've met who actually has something real to say. There was a quiet beat between them. Would you like to go out again? Sophia asked softly. Maybe this weekend? I could cook for you. Marcus could barely contain his happiness. I'd love to. Perfect, she said, scribbling her address on a napkin. Saturday at 7. And Mike? Come hungry. My lasagna puts people in a food coma. As she walked out, Marcus stood frozen for a moment, still grinning like a fool. For the first time in weeks, he felt something he thought he'd lost long ago. Hope, Chapter 1. The Last Blind Date. The sun had dipped low behind the Dallas skyline, casting long golden streaks across the quiet streets, as Marcus Chen drove his battered old Honda Civic through neighborhoods he barely recognized. He glanced at the napkin resting on the passenger's seat. Her address was scribbled in hurried handwriting, as though written by someone always on the move. Sophia Mendes. Her name echoed softly in his mind. There was something about her, an ease, a realness, that clung to him long after she left the cafe, and after 20 failed dates filled with polite, calculated conversations. Sophia's messy hair and dirt-streaked smile had crashed into his world like a breath of unfiltered air. He pulled up in front of a modest blue bungalow that sat nestled among other quiet, well-kept houses. A porch wrapped around the front, its railing draped with vibrant, flowering plants that swayed gently in the warm evening breeze. Soft, yellow light spilled from the windows. For a moment, Marcus sat still, his heart pounding as if he were some nervous teenager, not the billionaire CEO of one of the most powerful companies in town. Taking a deep breath, he stepped out, smoothing down his flannel shirt and jeans, carefully selected to maintain the illusion. There would be no Italian suits, no shining cufflinks tonight. Only Mike Santos, the man Sophia believed him to be. Before he could knock, the front door swung open. "Mike, you're right on time," Sophia beamed. She wore a simple floral dress, her long brown hair tied back loosely, a small streak of flour dusting her cheek. The kitchen behind her was alive with warm light, and the faint scent of garlic and tomatoes drifted into the evening air. Marcus smiled, unable to hide his nerves. "Hey, I hope I'm not overdressed for dinner." She laughed, stepping aside to let him in. "Not unless you're hiding a tux under that flannel." The inside of the house felt like another world compared to the cold glass penthouse Marcus returned to every night. The furniture was old but cared for, filled with character rather than status. The walls held dozens of framed photographs. Her as a child beside an older man he assumed was her father. Birthdays, picnics, and snapshots of what could only be described as a life fully lived. "You live here alone?" he asked gently as she led him to the dining room. Sophia shook her head. "With my grandma. She raised me after my parents passed. She moved into a smaller place closer to the city a few months ago. But this house, this is home." Marcus's throat tightened. Home. A word that had meant so little to him for so long. Dinner was already laid out on a small wooden table. Lasagna, fresh bread, and a salad that glistened with olive oil. The plates didn't match, the napkins were folded unevenly, but everything felt impossibly perfect. They sat down together. "I hope you're hungry," Sophia grinned, slicing into the lasagna. Like I said, this stuff has a reputation. He smiled, trying to calm his racing heart. You cook like this often? Only for people I like. The words hung in the air longer than either of them expected. For a moment, Marcus almost forgot the lie. He almost forgot the persona. Sitting here with her, it was so easy to pretend that this, the simple life, the honest conversation, the cozy house, was his reality. As they ate, Sophia shared stories about growing up with her father in the mining business, how he taught her to pan for gold when she was barely old enough to hold the sieve, how after he died, the men at the mine tried to help her carry on his work. They thought I was just the boss's daughter, she said, her voice softening. They figured I'd sell the property off like everyone else. But I didn't. I learned everything, fixed the machinery, ran the books, negotiated contracts. The land's not worth much, but it's ours. Marcus listened quietly, fascinated. The woman across from him was stronger than anyone he'd met in years. She wasn't chasing wealth. She was building something meaningful, with grit, with heart. And what about you, Mike? She asked after a while, her brown eyes meeting his across the table. What made you walk away from construction? The question landed like a small stone in his stomach. The moment he feared, the thin ice cracking beneath his feet. He hesitated, choosing his words with care. I guess I got tired of building things that didn't matter. Sophia watched him for a beat, her gaze thoughtful. But she didn't press. Instead, she reached across the table and poured him another glass of water, her smile gentle. That's fair, she said simply. Sometimes life pushes you to find something worth building for. They spoke late into the night, about dreams, regrets, and quiet hopes. Sophia confessed her biggest dream was to one day open a technical school near the mine, to teach people real skills, to give back to the town that had given her a second chance. I know it sounds crazy, she added, tucking a loose strand of hair behind her ear, but I want to prove that just because you come from a small place doesn't mean you have to stay small. It's not crazy, Marcus said softly. It's beautiful. She blushed, looking down at her plate. Most people laugh at it. Marcus felt the words building inside him, the desperate need to tell her who he really was, to strip away the lie before it grew larger. But as he opened his mouth, she stood and began clearing the plates. Come on, she said with a grin. There's dessert. Before he knew it, she was pulling a pie from the oven, humming softly as she moved around the kitchen. He watched her from the table, his chest tightening. She had no idea who he really was. No clue about the billions in assets, the skyscrapers bearing his family's name, or the corporate empire he commanded by day. And yet, she was the first person in years who looked at him like a man, not a prize. When dessert was done, Sophia walked him to the front porch. The night air was warm and still, the moon hanging like a soft lantern above them. Thank you for tonight, Marcus said, his voice quiet. Sophia smiled. Thank you for coming. They stood there for a beat too long, a charged silence growing between them. Then, almost instinctively, Marcus leaned in, but as he went to kiss her cheek, she turned her head at the last second, and their lips met at the corner of her mouth, a breathless, awkward, sweet collision. Oops, Sophia whispered, cheeks flushed. That wasn't very smooth, was it? Marcus laughed softly. It was perfect. As he turned to leave, Sophia called after him. Wait. She jogged up to him barefoot, pulling a pen from her dress pocket. Gently, she took his hand and scribbled her phone number across his palm. There, she said with a smile. Now you have no excuse not to call. Marcus smiled, his heart full in a way he hadn't felt in years. I won't need an excuse. As he drove away in his borrowed Civic, the number still tingling against his skin, Marcus Chen knew one thing with absolute certainty. For the first time in his life, he was no longer pretending. Chapter 2. Dinner with Secrets. The days after that dinner slipped by in a way Marcus hadn't experienced in years. Gently, as if life itself was giving him permission to breathe for once. There were no urgent board meetings, no financial forecasts or high-stakes negotiations, only text messages that made his heart race, and simple phone calls that felt like small gifts he wasn't sure he deserved. Sophia, are you allergic to mushrooms? Lasagna recipe version 2 depends on it. Marcus, safe from mushrooms, allergic to missing dinner though. Each message from her was like a little tether pulling him closer to something real, something he had spent years convincing himself he couldn't have. Now as the Civic rumbled down a familiar dirt road towards Sophia's house, Marcus felt that odd cocktail of nervousness and anticipation stirring inside him again. Tonight wasn't a first date, but it felt heavier somehow, deeper, more dangerous. This was the kind of night where hearts got invested. He parked in the same spot as before. The small bungalow looked even more inviting now, the porch lights glowing softly against the encroaching night. A breeze rustled through the hanging planters, carrying with it the scent of fresh basil and baked bread. Sophia met him at the door, barefoot, smiling with a warmth that made his chest tighten. She wore another one of those simple sundresses that made her look like summer itself, unpretentious, beautiful, alive. "You came hungry, right?" she teased, stepping aside to let him in. "I've been fasting for this moment all day," Marcus grinned. As soon as he stepped inside, the comfort of her home wrapped around him like a quiet embrace. The worn wooden floors, the scent of tomato sauce simmering, the faint music playing from a dusty old radio on the windowsill. And underneath it all, that subtle feeling that this house was more than just walls. It was lived in love. The table was already set, but tonight, something was different. In the far corner of the dining room, a small box of old photo albums sat open, the topmost one spread across the coffee table. Sophia must have seen his glance, because her smile softened. "Grandma dropped off a bunch of old photos today. I was just looking through them before you got here." Marcus followed her gaze. The first photo he saw was of Sophia as a little girl, maybe 5 or 6, wearing oversized rubber boots and holding a pan full of muddy rocks. Next to her stood a broad-shouldered man with a scruffy beard, one arm draped over her tiny shoulders. "My dad," Sophia said softly, noticing where his eyes landed. "That was the first time he took me out prospecting. Said I had a better eye for gold than most grown men." Marcus walked closer, his hands gently resting in his pockets as if afraid to disturb the moment. "You two look happy." "We were." Her voice caught briefly but steadied. "He taught me everything. Not just about mining, but about how to build something that matters, about being responsible for more than just yourself." She gently closed the album and glanced back at him. "I'm sorry, I didn't mean to get all sentimental." "Don't apologize," Marcus said. "That's the most beautiful thing anyone said to me all week." They moved to the table and dinner began much like their first meal. Easy, effortless. Sophia served generous helpings of her famous lasagna, and Marcus pretended not to notice when she quietly skipped pouring herself a glass of wine. As they ate, conversation flowed in waves. Work, childhood, small-town gossip, but as the meal stretched on, Sophia's questions started to carefully tug at Marcus's carefully built fiction. "So, when you said you're reconsidering construction," she started, voice light but curious. "What does that mean? Do you want to switch trades, go back to school, open your own business?" Marcus took a slow sip of his water, buying precious seconds. How many half-truths had he already told, and how long could he keep them safe before they collapsed on top of him? "I guess," he exhaled, choosing his words carefully. "I guess I just reached a point where I realized I was building things for other people, people who cared more about profits than people. I want something different now." Sophia studied him, not with suspicion, but with a gentle kind of searching. "Different how?" He hesitated. The truth was dangerously close to his throat now. "Because I've spent my life building skyscrapers while feeling emptier with each floor I climbed. Because I've been surrounded by people who want my wealth, not my heart. Because this right here, this table, this house, this woman, feels more like home than my billion-dollar penthouse ever has." But instead, he offered the only piece of truth he could safely give. "I want to build something that means something," he said softly. Sophia's expression softened, and she nodded slowly, as if she understood far more than his words revealed. "That's a good answer," she whispered. For a moment, Marcus thought the conversation would shift, but Sophia wasn't done. "I hope you don't think I'm being nosy," she said gently. "But what about your family? Your parents, siblings?" Marcus froze for half a second, feeling the weight of his real life crawling up his spine. His sister, Isabella's face flashed in his mind like a cold gust of wind. My parents passed away a while ago. That was true enough. And siblings. He forced a small smile. I have one older sister. We're not very close. Sophia caught the tension but didn't push. Instead, she simply nodded, as if respecting his boundaries. Well, she said, changing the subject, if you ever need a substitute family, Grandma Maria is always recruiting. Marcus laughed. Recruiting for what? Sophia smirked. For interrogations, mostly. She has a sixth sense about people. Good, he chuckled nervously. Can't wait to meet her. Sophia's eyes sparkled with amusement. You think I'm joking? You'll see. They finished dinner and stepped out onto the porch afterward, settling into a pair of creaky old rocking chairs. The Texas stars hung heavy above them, glowing brighter here than they ever did through Marcus's penthouse windows. As the night breeze gently swirled around them, Sophia spoke again, this time softer, more vulnerable. I know I might seem put together, she began, but truth is, sometimes I still wake up terrified that all this will collapse, that the mine will fail, that the bills will stack up, that I'll lose everything my father worked for. Marcus's heart clenched. He wanted so badly to tell her that if she fell, he would catch her, that she would never have to carry any of it alone again. But to say that would mean exposing who he really was. And he wasn't ready. Not yet. Instead, he whispered, You're stronger than you think, Sophia. She looked over at him, eyes glistening in the moonlight. I hope so. A long, quiet beat passed between them. Then, softly, Sophia asked, Do you believe in second chances, Mike? Marcus turned toward her fully now, his voice barely above a breath. I didn't. Not for a long time. But sitting here right now, yeah, I do. Sophia smiled and reached for his hand. Her fingers were calloused, warm, steady. And as Marcus laced his fingers through hers, he felt something shift deep in his chest, something terrifying but beautiful. He was falling for her, and with every beat of his heart, the lie he lived weighed heavier. Chapter 3: The Mining Visit. The sun was just cresting over the distant hills when Marcus pulled up to the edge of the Mendes property. For the first time since meeting Sophia, he wasn't meeting her at her house or in town. Today, she had invited him into the center of her world, the mine. As the dust settled from his tires, Marcus took a long breath, surveying the site. It wasn't the kind of mining operation he was used to seeing on glossy reports and corporate spreadsheets. There were no towering machines or endless fleets of trucks. Instead, it was raw, honest, and surprisingly alive. Dozens of workers moved like clockwork, some operating small excavators, others examining sediment, some hauling equipment. A few makeshift structures lined the edges. Trailers converted into offices, a tiny mechanics shed, a first aid station. In the distance, an old flag waved stubbornly against the morning breeze. Sophia was waiting near one of the processing stations, wearing a bright yellow hard hat and scuffed rubber boots, looking more at home than Marcus had ever seen her. As he stepped out of the car, she waved, her grin wide and familiar. You made it, she called, walking briskly toward him. A streak of dirt marked one side of her cheek again, and her braid swung behind her shoulder like a badge of pride. Of course I made it, Marcus smiled, taking in her energy. Wouldn't miss seeing the empire you've built? Sophia laughed, handing him a spare hard hat. Empire's a little generous, but come on, I'll give you the full tour. As they walked through the site, Sophia explained everything with contagious enthusiasm. How the sediment was washed and filtered, how the old equipment still managed to run after decades, how the miners had learned to fix almost anything with duct tape, spare parts, and stubbornness. Marcus listened closely, genuinely fascinated. In his boardrooms, mining was just numbers and quarterly reports. Here, it was sweat, grit, and pride. You've built something really special here, Marcus said quietly as they passed a cluster of workers sifting through gravel. Sophia smiled. I'm trying. My dad used to say, the real gold isn't in the ground, it's in the people who work beside you. A voice suddenly cut in from behind. And sometimes the real gold is figuring out who's standing beside you for the right reasons. Marcus turned toward the sharp, gravelly voice and found himself face to face with an older woman, short, wiry, and standing like someone half her age. Her silver-gray hair was pulled tightly into a bun, her eyes sharp as polished steel. "Grandma Maria." Sophia's entire posture shifted into playful exasperation. "Grandma, please." "What?" Maria raised an eyebrow, crossing her arms. "I'm allowed to be curious." Sophia shook her head but smiled. "Mike, this is my grandmother, Maria Mendes." "Grandma, this is Mike Santos." Maria's gaze narrowed on Marcus, studying him like a hawk examining its prey. Marcus smiled and reached out a hand. "It's a pleasure to meet you, ma'am." Maria shook his hand, but her grip was surprisingly strong, her eyes never breaking contact. She muttered after a moment. "Your hands are soft for a construction worker." The word struck like a sharp pebble, and Marcus felt his heart skip for a moment. He forced a chuckle, trying to deflect. "I've been out of work for a little while, actually." Maria didn't blink. Even unemployed, most men still get calluses from living. Soft hands mean soft work, or no work. "Grandma," Sophia said, her voice half amused, half scolding, "not everyone works on a mining crew." "I'm just observing," Maria sniffed but finally released his hand. "I have eyes. I use them." Marcus couldn't help but respect the woman's blunt honesty. She reminded him, strangely, of some of the toughest board members he'd faced. Only Maria didn't play games. She went straight for the throat. Sophia quickly redirected the conversation, mercifully rescuing him. "Let's keep moving. I want to show you the lab setup." As they walked on, Marcus could feel Maria's gaze burning into his back, as if she were peeling away every layer of his carefully crafted disguise. The lab was a small structure, its walls lined with equipment that looked as though it had been scavenged from auctions, second-hand dealers, and a lot of creative problem-solving. Sophia spoke with pride as she explained how she had taught herself to analyze mineral samples, track yields, and run most of the tests herself. "This used to be my dad's world," she said softly, running her hand along a metal countertop. "When he died, a lot of people tried to buy us out cheap. They thought I'd fold. But I couldn't. Not after everything he built." Marcus felt another surge of emotion welling inside him. The weight of what she'd carried alone was humbling. "And the school?" he asked gently. Sophia's face brightened, her dream reigniting as always. "Someday, a small technical school right here, teach young people how to work safely, how to modernize operations, how to make this place better. Real skills, real futures. Not just mining, but management, repairs, geology, everything. This town gave me a chance. I want to give something back." Her voice cracked slightly at the end, and Marcus felt the words gathering in his throat, desperate to confess who he truly was, that he could make her school happen tomorrow if she would let him. But still, the lie held him back. Instead, he whispered, "That's a beautiful dream." As the afternoon wore on, they joined some of the crew for lunch under a cluster of trees where wooden picnic tables sat in the shade. Sophia introduced him to some of her tight-knit team: Joel, the machinery expert; Carla, the self-taught geologist; and Tonino, who made coffee so strong Marcus thought it might strip paint. The workers were welcoming but curious, their glances lingering a little too long, as though sensing that Mike Santos didn't quite fit. Joel joked about Marcus's inability to carry a water bucket without looking like it weighed 100 pounds. Carla laughed when Marcus accidentally tripped over a hose while trying to help. Even Sophia laughed, though gently. "You are officially the least coordinated person I've ever met." Marcus raised his hands in surrender. "I'm a little out of practice." "Out of practice? Mike, it looks like you've never even seen dirt before." They all laughed, and for a brief moment, Marcus allowed himself to feel like he belonged here, like he was part of this strange, beautiful world, the world he was falling deeper into every time he looked at Sophia. As lunch ended, Maria appeared once again, seemingly out of thin air, sitting down across from him as the others drifted away. Her eyes were calm now, but unwavering. "You're hiding something," she said without preamble. Marcus froze, feeling the words land like stones against his ribs. "Ma'am? You may have fooled my granddaughter for now, but not me," she said quietly. "I've lived too long to mistake polished manners for honesty." I don't know what you mean." Maria smiled, but it was not warm. "If you hurt her, if you lie to her, I'll see through it, and I'll make sure you answer for it." Marcus swallowed hard, his heart pounding. She stood up, leaving him sitting alone under the trees, her words hanging heavily in the air. As Sophia returned moments later, smiling and brushing hair from her face, Marcus forced a smile of his own, but inside, his chest burned with guilt. He had come here today thinking he was gaining her trust, but now he knew. The longer he kept the truth hidden, the more dangerous the fall would be. Chapter 4: Isabella's Plan. Across town, in a world that couldn't feel more distant from the dusty mining site, Isabella Chen sat inside her high-rise office, tapping her perfectly manicured nails against the marble desk. Her floor-to-ceiling windows offered an unobstructed view of downtown Dallas, glass towers gleaming like steel monuments to her family's empire. But Isabella wasn't admiring the view. Her sharp eyes were fixed on the large file spread across her desk, filled with printed reports, grainy surveillance photos, and a thick stack of notes. The headline on one photo read, "Subject: Marcus Chen, alias Mike Santos." "You're certain?" she asked, without looking up. Across from her sat Rodrigo Carvalho, the private investigator she'd hired. He was in his 50s, balding, with tired eyes and the stale scent of coffee and cigarettes clinging to his clothes. His voice was gravelly, but steady. "Certain, ma'am. He's been living as this Mike Santos persona for almost 2 months. The woman's name is Sophia Mendes, works as a small-time prospector, mining operation on the outskirts." Isabella flipped through the photos, her lips curling into a thin, cold smile. There were shots of Marcus hauling buckets awkwardly at the mine, Sophia leading him around the site, them sitting close together under the trees, laughing like 2 teenagers. "What a joke," Isabella muttered. "Pretending to be broke, playing house with some dirt-streak girl from the countryside." Rodrigo raised an eyebrow. "From what I gathered, ma'am, she doesn't know who he really is." "Of course she doesn't," Isabella snapped. "That's the point. Marcus has always had this ridiculous obsession with finding someone who loves him for who he is." She let out a bitter laugh. "As if that ever exists." Rodrigo cleared his throat. "He's not entirely wrong, though. The girl seems genuine." Isabella shot him a cold glare that made his voice die in his throat. "That's irrelevant. You and I both know how these stories end. Once she finds out who he really is, she'll want the money. They always do. I've seen it too many times." She stood up, pacing slowly around the room, her designer heels clicking rhythmically against the polished floor. "But Marcus has gone too far this time. He's risking the family's image, the company's stability, all for some little romance experiment." Rodrigo hesitated, then ventured carefully, "So, what do you want me to do now?" Isabella stopped pacing, her eyes narrowing with calculated precision. "We're going to help the truth come out." She smiled thinly. "Except we'll present it with a few adjustments." Rodrigo looked uneasy. "Adjustments?" "I want you to manufacture evidence. Fabricate an engagement. Make it look like Marcus has been engaged for years to someone far more suitable." Rodrigo's eyes widened. "You want me to forge legal documents?" "Not just legal documents. Photos, contracts, private correspondence, everything. When this Sophia girl finds out Marcus has been lying to both her and his fiancée, she'll walk away, and Marcus will come crawling back to reality, where he belongs." Rodrigo shifted uncomfortably. "That's highly illegal, ma'am." Isabella's voice turned razor sharp. "You're not being hired for your moral compass, Rodrigo. You'll be paid very well, and your previous mistakes will stay buried." He swallowed hard, understanding the weight of her threat. "Yes, ma'am." Isabella walked back to her desk, pressing her manicured finger against the intercom. "Lucy, get me our digital editing team, and find someone who can play the part of Victoria Hamilton." A voice crackled through the speaker. "Yes, Ms. Chen." Isabella sat down again, eyes gleaming. "Let's build the perfect scandal." 2 weeks later, the plan was fully in motion. The fabricated engagement portfolio was disturbingly flawless. The photos showed Marcus in luxury suits, arm in arm with a beautiful blonde socialite Isabella had hired for the staged photo shoots. The documents included false engagement contracts, joint financial statements, even fabricated gossip magazine articles, suggesting an upcoming wedding between Marcus Chen and Victoria Hamilton, heiress to an oil fortune. Every detail had been carefully constructed to withstand initial scrutiny. And now, it was time for the reveal. Sophia was at the mining site, reviewing inventory when she noticed a sleek black SUV pull up near the entrance. The vehicle stood out sharply against the dusty work trucks and beat-up pickups that usually dotted the lot. A woman in her early 30s stepped out, impeccably dressed in a tailored navy suit, oversized sunglasses covering her face. She carried a leather briefcase and exuded an air of polite authority. "Mrs. Mendes?" the woman asked, approaching. Sophia wiped her hands on her jeans, cautious. "Yes." The woman offered a business card. "Julia Rodriguez, Social Dallas Magazine. I'm here working on an exposé," she continued smoothly, "about powerful men in Texas and the secret lives they lead. Your name has come up in relation to Marcus Chen." Sophia frowned. "I don't know any Marcus Chen." Julia smiled gently. "You know him as Mike Santos." Sophia's blood ran cold. Julia opened the briefcase and removed the file, laying out several glossy photographs and printed documents on a nearby crate. "I'm sorry you had to find out this way, Miss Mendez, but it's better you see the truth yourself." Sophia's eyes scanned the photos. Marcus, smiling beside the blonde woman. Attending charity galas, boarding private jets, wearing expensive designer suits she had never seen him in. The captions beneath read, "Marcus Chen and fiancée Victoria Hamilton, 2 years engaged." "No," Sophia whispered, shaking her head. "No, this isn't real. The engagement was kept private for business reasons, of course. But this relationship between you and him, it's unfortunate you got pulled into it." Tears burned in Sophia's eyes as she clutched the papers. "He told me he was unemployed." Julia's voice softened with faux sympathy. "We've seen this before. Billionaires playing poor to avoid gold diggers. It's quite the social experiment, isn't it?" Sophia stared at the woman, her mind spinning. Every moment she'd spent with Marcus, every smile, every laugh, now felt twisted, poisoned. She whispered again, "I trusted him." Julia gently placed the remaining documents back in the folder, her expression sympathetic but detached. "I'll leave you to process everything. If you wish to make a statement, my contact information is in the file." Without another word, she turned and walked back to her car, leaving Sophia standing frozen in the Texas heat, her world collapsing around her. That night, as the sky darkened and the hum of cicadas filled the air, Sophia sat on her porch, staring at the stars. Stars she once shared with Marcus while dreaming aloud about second chances. Now, those same stars felt cold. Her chest tightened with betrayal. The man she thought she was falling in love with never even existed. Mike Santos. Marcus Chen. The man who loved her. The man who lied. Tears finally fell, silent, heavy, relentless. But even in that heartbreak, one truth anchored itself deep inside her. That she was not just fighting for herself anymore. She placed a trembling hand over her stomach. There was a baby now, and somehow, in the middle of this storm, she had to find the strength to protect them both. Chapter 5. The Heartbreak Revelation. Marcus had no warning when the knock came. It was late, well past dinner, and he had been pacing his apartment for hours, rehearsing how he would finally confess everything to Sophia. His mind had played the same scene over and over. The nervous admission, the tears, the fragile hope that maybe, just maybe, she would still love him. But when he opened the door, everything unraveled far faster than he could have imagined. Sophia stood there on his doorstep, her breathing shallow, her face pale, her brown eyes wild and stormy. She wasn't holding flowers or smiling softly the way she had so many times before. Instead, she held a folder in one trembling hand, the one filled with Isabella's fabricated lies. Marcus felt the bottom of his stomach drop. "Sophia," he whispered, heart hammering. "What's—" Her voice came sharp, almost brittle. Who is Victoria Hamilton? The question struck like a blade. Marcus froze for a split second, eyes darting to the papers in her hand. Dozens of photographs, the forged galas, the staged parties, the counterfeit contracts, all staring back at him like ghosts. "Sophia, listen to me," he said quickly, stepping forward. "It's not what it looks like." "Not what it looks like?" Her voice cracked, rising. "Because it looks like you've been engaged to someone else this entire time. It looks like everything you've told me about your name, your job, your life, was one giant lie." Tears were already streaming down her face now, but there was a fire behind them, an anger that he knew came from deep, soul-ripping hurt. Marcus raised his hands, desperate. "Sophia, please. Those pictures aren't real. None of it is real. I swear to you, I'm not engaged. That woman, she's not part of my life. It's a setup." She let out a sharp, bitter laugh. "A setup? Really? And who would go through all this trouble to set you up, Mike? Or should I say, Marcus?" The sound of his real name on her lips crushed him. "I never wanted to lie to you," he said, his voice breaking. I didn't know how to tell you. I was terrified you'd see me for my money instead of who I am." She shook her head violently. "You made me fall in love with a man who doesn't even exist." "That's not true," Marcus pleaded. "The man you fell in love with, that was me. Every moment we shared was real. The dinners, the stories, the nights on your porch, the lasagna, all of it was real." "But everything else," she snapped, "your name, your job, your entire identity, none of it was." She turned as if to leave, but Marcus instinctively followed, his voice raw. "Sophia, please, don't go like this." She spun around, her tears blinding her. "Don't follow me. Don't make this harder than it already is. Sophia, think about the baby." The words slipped from his mouth before he could stop them, and they froze both of them in place. For a few seconds, all that could be heard was the soft hum of the city beyond the apartment windows. Her chin quivered. "You don't get to use the baby now," she whispered. "Not after everything. Yes, I'm pregnant. Yes, it's yours, but that child won't grow up knowing lies." Marcus swallowed, his chest burning. "Please, don't do this. Let me explain everything." She stepped back toward the door. "You had your chance to tell the truth, Marcus. But instead, you let me believe in a man who never existed." Her hand was on the doorknob now. "My name is Marcus," he said softly, one last desperate attempt. "But my love for you? That was always real." Sophia's breath hitched as her tears fell harder. "Maybe it was," she whispered, her voice barely audible, "but love without truth isn't love at all." And then she left. The door closed softly behind her, but for Marcus, the sound might as well have been an explosion. The echo of it bounced inside his chest, hollowing him out completely. For days afterward, Marcus barely functioned. He sat in his office, staring at his phone, rereading old text messages from her, watching the video of her first ultrasound appointment that she had once sent him with so much excitement. He barely slept, barely ate. And every time his mind wandered to the image of her standing there, eyes full of betrayal, the guilt threatened to swallow him whole. James, ever loyal, watched his boss spiral. "Mr. Marcus," he finally said softly one evening, "you need to fight for her." Marcus shook his head, exhausted. "I lied, James, for months. She deserves better than me." James spoke firmly. "No one's perfect, but you love her, and she loves you. She's just drowning right now. You have to show her the truth. You have to fight." Marcus rubbed his hands over his face. "How do I fight against something like this?" James looked him directly in the eyes. "Start by telling her everything." Finally. But Marcus wasn't the only one unraveling. Back at the mining site, Sophia pushed herself harder than ever. She worked long hours, often skipping meals, her stomach churning more from heartbreak than pregnancy sickness. The miners watched her with worried glances, but none dared confront her. Only Grandma Maria saw through the armor. "Child," Maria said one morning, as she handed Sophia a plate of toast she hadn't asked for, "you're not going to fix a broken heart by wearing yourself into the ground." Sophia didn't answer, her swollen eyes giving away the tears she refused to cry in public. Maria gently placed a hand on her shoulder. You loved him. Sophia's voice was hoarse. I don't even know who he is. Maria nodded slowly. But you knew his heart. Sophia swallowed the lump in her throat. And that's the part that hurts the most. For a few moments, Maria stayed silent, simply rubbing her granddaughter's back the way she had when Sophie was a little girl waking from nightmares. After a long pause, Maria whispered, You still love him, Sophia. Tears escaped again, no longer held back. I don't know how to stop. Maria kissed her granddaughter's hair. Then, don't. Sophia collapsed into her grandmother's arms, sobbing softly. Meanwhile, across the city, Isabella watched it all unfold from the comfort of her penthouse. Rodrigo updated her daily. She's not answering his calls. She's refusing to see him. The mining team is closing ranks around her. Isabella smiled, swirling her wine. Good. Let it stay that way. He'll come back to reality soon enough. Rodrigo hesitated. Are you sure you want to keep pressing this? Isabella's eyes narrowed. She was never good enough for him. I'm protecting him and our family's name. But deep inside, she knew it was never really about protecting Marcus. It was about control. And miles away, both Marcus and Sophia laid awake at night in their separate homes, their hearts broken, but still reaching for one another. Two people pulled apart by lies, still desperately in love. But now, standing on opposite sides of a canyon neither knew how to cross. Chapter 6. Losing Everything. The conference room was cold, not because of the temperature, but because of the people sitting inside it. Marcus sat at the head of the long, polished table, his reflection faintly mirrored in its glossy surface. His lawyers flanked him on either side, while across from him sat Chen Industries' board of directors, men and women who had known him since he was a child, now looking at him like a stranger. And at the far end sat Isabella. Her expression was calm, poised, but the victorious glint in her eyes made Marcus sick. Let the record show, Dr. Harrison, Marcus's longtime family attorney, began carefully, that Marcus Chen is voluntarily relinquishing his position as CEO of Chen Industries, effective immediately, along with his shares and control over the majority of his financial holdings. The words hung in the air like smoke. Isabella steepled her fingers. Are you certain, Marcus? Her voice was soft, falsely concerned. You still have time to reconsider. You're emotional right now. This girl, this scandal, it's clouded your judgment. Marcus didn't blink. I've never seen more clearly. A few members of the board shifted uncomfortably. They weren't used to this version of Marcus. Stripped of his polished corporate armor, no expensive suit today, no tailored designer watch, just a simple shirt, worn jeans, and a man who had finally decided what mattered. Harrison carefully placed the thick contract in front of him. If you sign, Marcus, there's no going back. Marcus reached for the pen. His hand didn't shake. I'm not giving up, he said softly. I'm finally living. And with one steady stroke, he signed his name and walked away from everything he had spent his life building. Later that night, Marcus sat alone in his now echoing penthouse. The silence was deafening. He wandered from room to room, running his hand along the sleek furniture, the artwork, the marble counters, all of it meaningless now. Every corner reminded him of the life he had tried to fill with things instead of people. He paused at the window, staring out across the glittering city. Somewhere out there was Sophia and their child, and the simple life he had tasted just briefly. The life he now knew he wanted more than anything. Headlines exploded across every media outlet by morning. Billion marathoner CEO Marcus Chen donates billions to charity. Chen Industries hair walks away from family empire. Marcus Chen reveals plans to fund rural development, technical education. Reporters camped outside his building, journalists speculated wildly about his sanity, talk shows debated whether he'd lost his mind or achieved enlightenment. Isabella was livid. In her office, she slammed the morning paper onto the table, her face flushed with fury. This is insane, she spat to her legal team. He's handing away everything our father built. Her lawyer, Dr. Peterson, tried to calm her. He's within his rights, Isabella. The donation is legal. Not if he's declared mentally incompetent, she hissed. Start building the case, now." Meanwhile, far from the skyscrapers and flashing cameras, Sophia watched the coverage from her grandmother's living room. The television glowed softly in the corner as the reporter announced, "Chen Industries confirmed that the fund will primarily serve rural communities with a focus on small business development, mining safety programs, and educational scholarships." Sophia felt her chest tighten. She knew exactly what that meant. That was her dream, the dream she had shared with Marcus, the dream he was now making real, even after everything. Tears pricked her eyes. "He's doing this for you," Grandma Maria said softly beside her. Sophia didn't answer. She couldn't. The weight of it was too much. How could the man who had broken her heart be the same man sacrificing everything to honor her vision? "Maybe he lied about who he was at first," Maria continued gently, "but this part is who he really is." Sophia stared at the screen, unable to pull her eyes away from his face as he spoke to the press. "For most of my life, I measured my worth by wealth, but I've learned the hard way that money without meaning is hollow. I hope this fund creates opportunities for people who deserve second chances." Sophia whispered, almost to herself, "He's giving up everything." Maria squeezed her hand. "Sometimes, child. That's what love looks like." But Isabella wasn't finished. Within days, she filed a petition with the court to have Marcus declared mentally incompetent, claiming emotional instability and financial recklessness. She provided stacks of falsified evidence. Private investigators' reports about Marcus assuming a fake identity, the fabricated photos with Victoria Hamilton, and expert testimonies about erratic behavior. And suddenly, Marcus found himself standing in front of a judge, fighting not just for his fortune, but for his integrity. The courtroom was filled with cameras, journalists, and observers eager for scandal. Marcus stood calmly at the center of the storm, dressed simply, without high-powered attorneys or flashy suits. The judge peered at him over his glasses. "Mr. Chen, are you aware that this court has the authority to reverse your donation on grounds of mental instability?" "I am, Your Honor." "You do realize you've given away billions?" "I do." "And you understand that your family believes you've done this as the result of emotional distress?" Marcus took a breath. "No, Your Honor. I did it because it was the first decision in my life I made without fear, without greed. I finally stopped pretending." The judge studied him carefully, tapping his pen thoughtfully. In the gallery, Sophia sat quietly beside Grandma Maria, watching every moment with her heart pounding. Isabella's legal team presented all their fabricated evidence, the fake engagement, the photos, the doctored documents. They spoke of Marcus's erratic behavior, his 2-month disappearance from corporate duties, his bizarre relationship with a pregnant miner's daughter. Sophia's stomach turned as she listened. And then they called her to the stand. Sophia stood in front of the court, feeling every camera lens pointed directly at her. The judge's voice was kind but firm. "Miss Mendes, do you believe Marcus Chen is mentally unstable?" Sophia glanced briefly at Marcus, who watched her with nothing but quiet hope. She swallowed hard. "No, Your Honor, I don't." The courtroom buzzed at her answer. "Can you explain?" the judge asked. Sophia's voice shook slightly but grew stronger as she continued. "Marcus may have made mistakes. He lied to me about who he was, yes. But the man I came to know, the man who sat at my kitchen table, who helped carry buckets at the mine, who dreamed of building schools and helping our town, that man is not insane. He's finally free." Tears filled her eyes as she added softly, "And I still love him." A ripple swept across the courtroom. Even Isabella's cold facade cracked for a brief moment. The judge leaned back, nodding slowly. "This court finds no evidence of mental incompetence. Marcus Chen's donation will stand. This hearing is dismissed." The gavel struck. The fight was over. Outside the courthouse, reporters swarmed like bees, shouting questions. Marcus shielded his eyes from the flashes. But amidst the chaos, Sophia appeared. Without a word, she walked toward him. For a brief moment, they simply stood there, two souls who had been through fire. Then Sophia reached for his hand. Marcus blinked, as if afraid to believe she was real. "You came." "I never really left," she whispered. And as their hands finally found each other again, Marcus knew that while he had lost everything the world measured as valuable, he had finally found what mattered. Chapter 7. The Truth Uncovered. Though the courtroom battle was over, the weight of everything that had happened still lingered. The weeks that followed were quiet but heavy for Marcus and Sophia. They spent time together cautiously, co-parenting, talking gently, learning how to breathe again without breaking the fragile thread between them. Trust wasn't rebuilt overnight. Every smile between them was real but tentative. Every conversation was honest but careful. Both carried wounds that hadn't fully closed. Sophia had allowed Marcus back into her life, but a part of her heart still whispered, "What if he lies again? What if there's still more I don't know?" And that voice wouldn't let her sleep. One afternoon, while folding baby clothes in Grandma Maria's kitchen, Sophia found herself staring at the stack of fabricated photos again, the same ones Isabella's investigator had handed her weeks ago. The edges of the prints were perfectly cut, the lighting flawless, the expressions on Marcus's face so natural. Too natural. Something tugged at her. The more she stared, the more she noticed tiny things that didn't sit right. The way the shadows fell on Marcus but not on the woman beside him. The unnatural blur where arms overlapped, like two separate images stitched together. Sophia stood abruptly, her chest tightening. "Grandma," she said, breathless, "I think I know what Isabella did." Maria, without looking up from peeling carrots, calmly replied, "Took you long enough." Sophia blinked. "What?" Maria's eyes twinkled faintly with mischief. "I've been waiting for you to follow your gut, child. You always knew something wasn't right about those photos." Sophia sat down, hands shaking slightly. "If these were forged, then Marcus never betrayed me. Not the way I thought." Maria nodded. "Then you know what you have to do." Sophia exhaled. "I need proof." The next morning, Sophia drove to Dallas with a fire in her chest. She didn't call Marcus. She needed to do this on her own. This wasn't about him. It was about finally facing Isabella, about reclaiming her own peace. With steady nerves, she walked into Chen Industries and approached the reception desk. "I need to see Isabella Chen." The receptionist blinked, recognizing Sophia immediately from the tabloids. "Do you have an appointment?" "No," Sophia said, "but trust me, this won't take long." After a long, tense silence, the receptionist reluctantly led her to the 30th floor. As they reached Isabella's private suite, Sophia could already hear muffled voices behind the thick doors. She paused just outside, heart pounding, as Isabella's voice rang through the gap. "Are you sure everything's been destroyed? Every email, every receipt, every trace?" A man's voice, Rodrigo's, answered, "Yes, ma'am, everything was wiped. The editor who doctored the photos got paid off. No originals exist. We're safe." Sophia's blood froze. The door suddenly swung open as Isabella stepped out, startled to find Sophia standing inches away. For a brief second, neither spoke. Then Isabella's expression hardened. "What are you doing here?" Sophia crossed her arms, forcing her voice to stay calm. "We need to talk." "I have nothing to say to you," Isabella hissed, her smile tight. "You already got what you wanted. Marcus gave you everything." "No," Sophia replied evenly. "He gave you everything for years, and all you ever did was try to control him, but that ends today." Isabella narrowed her eyes. "Get out." Rodrigo appeared behind her, his face pale, clearly nervous. Sophia's voice sharpened. "I overheard everything, Isabella. The fabricated photos, the staged engagement, the fake documents you created." Isabella's jaw clenched. "You can't prove anything." Sophia slowly reached into her purse and pulled out her phone. "I recorded everything you just said." Isabella paled, stepping back slightly. "You?" The full confession. "Your voice, Rodrigo's, every word," Sophia continued, her voice steady now. "You created a fake scandal. You destroyed your brother's life. You tried to destroy mine. But now? Now I have the truth." Rodrigo started stammering. "Miss Chen, I didn't." "Shut up," Isabella snapped. But Sophia wasn't finished. "I already sent a backup copy of the recording to my attorney. If you try to destroy my evidence, it won't matter. The courts will hear everything, the police will too. A deep, dreadful silence settled between them. Isabella's cool exterior finally cracked. "Why are you doing this?" Sophia's answer was simple. "Because Marcus deserves the truth, and so does our son." That evening, as the sun dipped low, Marcus opened his front door to find Sophia standing there again. But this time, her eyes weren't filled with anger. They were filled with something new. She held up the folder of evidence. "It was never you, Marcus," she whispered. "It was Isabella all along." He blinked, barely able to speak. You have proof?" Sophia nodded. "That came from inside." Sophia nodded. Every word, every document. Sophia nodded. Tears filled Marcus's eyes as the weight of months, years, finally lifted from his chest. "You believed me?" he choked. Sophia stepped closer, her voice trembling. "I wanted to, but I was scared of being a fool, scared of trusting too easily again. But Marcus, you never betrayed me, and I've never stopped loving you." In one step, Marcus closed the distance between them, wrapping her into his arms. "I love you," he whispered into her hair, his voice breaking. "I've never loved anyone like I love you." Sophia buried her face into his chest. "Then let's finally live our truth." They held each other for what felt like forever. No more lies, no more barriers, only truth. 2 days later, Isabella stood before the court, her lies fully exposed. Rodrigo's full confession, along with financial records, forged documents, and digital traces from the photo editor, painted a clear picture of deliberate fraud. The judge delivered the final blow. Isabella Chen, you are hereby charged with forgery, fraud, and defamation. You will stand trial accordingly. As she was led away, her eyes briefly met Marcus's. But Marcus didn't gloat. He only shook his head gently. And as Sophia squeezed his hand beside him, he whispered, "It's over." Chapter 8. The beginning of healing. The courtroom battle was over. The scandal exposed, the lies finally buried. And yet, as Marcus and Sophia stood on the courthouse steps that day, the weight of everything they'd survived still hung gently between them like a silent third presence. The cameras flashed wildly as reporters shouted questions neither of them answered. Instead, Marcus only kept his hand tightly wrapped around Sophia's, shielding her as they made their way toward the waiting car. It was the first time they were walking forward together, but carefully, tenderly, as if afraid one wrong step might shatter the fragile peace they had just earned. That evening, the quiet finally settled. Marcus had invited Sophia to his house, not to impress, not to overwhelm, but simply to give them a place to talk, uninterrupted. No cameras, no boardrooms, no reporters, just them. Sophia sat on the plush couch in his living room, gently running her hand over her growing belly. Nearly 5 months now, and the bump was no longer small enough to hide beneath loose dresses. She had stopped hiding it anyway. It was a part of her. A part of them. Marcus sat across from her, unsure where to begin. "You've barely said a word all night," Sophia said softly, offering a small, tired smile. "I don't want to say the wrong thing," Marcus whispered. She shook her head gently. "There isn't a wrong thing anymore." He exhaled slowly, steadying his voice. "Sophia, you saved me. You saved me from my family, from myself. If you hadn't found that evidence," Sophia interrupted kindly, "you would have found your way. You've already changed more than you realize." Marcus looked at her, his voice tender. "I never wanted you to be dragged into this fight." Her eyes softened. "I wasn't dragged. I chose to stay. And Marcus, I still choose you." The words hit him like a warm wind, powerful, soft, and healing. He closed the distance between them and knelt gently at her feet, resting his hands on her knees. "I don't deserve you." "You're wrong," she whispered. "You deserve love. You just never knew what real love was." Marcus lowered his forehead to rest gently against her belly, feeling the small movements of the child growing inside. "I want to be better. For you, for him. You already are." The weeks that followed were filled with small, beautiful steps toward rebuilding. Marcus sold his penthouse and moved into a modest house on the outskirts of town, closer to Sophia, closer to her mining site, closer to the life he finally wanted to live. Sophia helped him pick out simple furniture, laughing at how useless he was at assembling anything that didn't require signing a contract. "Let me guess," she teased one afternoon while struggling with a stubborn IKEA coffee table. "You had assistants for this kind of thing." Marcus grinned sheepishly. "Many." "Well," she smirked, "welcome to real life, Mr. Chen." He chuckled. "Best life I've ever had." Marcus also began visiting the mining site regularly. Not as a visitor, but as a humble student. Joel taught him how to handle equipment. Carla explained the science behind the soil testing. Tonino made sure he never left without at least 3 cups of coffee, strong enough to restart his heart. For the first time in his life, Marcus felt useful, not because of money, but because of effort. He worked with his hands, he sweated under the sun, he laughed with the team, and most importantly, he earned their respect. One afternoon, while Sophia rested nearby under the shade of a large oak, Grandma Maria approached Marcus while he was cleaning equipment. Maria stood there, silent for a moment, watching him closely. The same sharp gaze that once sliced through his carefully rehearsed lies was now steady but warmer. "You've changed," she finally said. Marcus straightened, brushing sweat from his brow. "I'm trying." Maria nodded. "You're not pretending anymore. That's what matters." He swallowed. "Do you forgive me?" Maria's voice softened. "You didn't break my heart, Marcus. You broke hers. My forgiveness doesn't matter. Hers does. I'll spend my life earning it." Maria smiled faintly. "And that's exactly why you might just deserve it." She reached out and patted his shoulder, firm, motherly, and finally approving. Later that evening, as the sun sank low behind the hills, Marcus found Sophia sitting alone on her porch swing, her hands resting gently over her belly. The world around them was quiet, only the sounds of crickets, the hum of distant cicadas, and the warm breeze rustling through the trees. He sat beside her. Neither of them spoke for a while. There was no need. The silence was finally safe. "At last," Sophia whispered. "Sometimes I catch myself wondering, what would have happened if we'd met the way most people do?" Marcus turned, smiling softly. "You mean if I hadn't lied about everything?" She smiled too, but there was no bitterness behind it anymore. "Yes." He reached for her hand. "Then maybe you wouldn't have seen my heart first." Sophia nodded, tears welling gently in her eyes. "Maybe you're right." He leaned in, pressing his lips gently to her temple. "I wouldn't change any of it, Sophia, not if it still led me to you." She closed her eyes, resting her head against his shoulder. "I'm finally ready," she whispered. "For what?" That night was not marked by grand speeches or dramatic declarations. It was marked by something far rarer, quiet trust. The beginning of something they had both been chasing their whole lives. A love that needed no disguises. Chapter 9. A proposal of redemption. The months after their quiet reconciliation moved with a kind of grace neither Marcus nor Sophia expected. The town adjusted quickly to the new version of Marcus Chen. No longer the billionaire hiding behind boardroom glass, he became simply Marcus, the man who drank coffee at the corner diner, the man who loaded supplies at the mining site, the man who proudly followed Sophia like a lovesick shadow. And with every passing day, the heavy remnants of their past loosened their grip. Trust had grown back between them, not as something forced, but something slowly planted, watered, and quietly blooming. The nights were their softest hours, long porch talks under wide Texas stars, her head resting gently on his shoulder as their child kicked inside her growing belly. And though Marcus said nothing aloud, his heart had been whispering one unspoken truth for weeks now. He wanted to marry her. Not because he needed to fix what was broken. Not because of guilt, but because she was home. It was a warm evening when Marcus finally decided it was time. The sun dipped below the distant hills, watching everything in a soft golden glow. The air smelled faintly of honeysuckle and fresh rain. Sophia was seated on her porch swing, humming gently, her hand resting over her now very visible bump. Their son, just weeks from arriving, moved within her like a quiet reminder that life was waiting. Marcus stepped outside, heart pounding, holding a small black box in his hand. She looked up and smiled as he approached. "You okay? You look nervous." He chuckled softly, sitting beside her. "I am." Sophia raised an amused eyebrow. "Why?" Marcus exhaled slowly, turning to face her fully. "These last few months, they've been the best of my life," he began, his voice trembling slightly. "Not because I left the company. Not because of the money I gave away. But because I finally stopped running. I finally figured out who I am." Sophia's eyes softened, her smile tender. Marcus took her hand gently into his. "I lied to you once, Sophia, and you still chose to forgive me. You gave me a second chance when I didn't deserve one. You've taught me what love means, what family means." Her breath caught. She already sensed what was coming, but her heart pounded anyway. Marcus lowered himself onto one knee. "I know I've made mistakes," he whispered, voice thick with emotion. "But I want to spend the rest of my life making up for them. Not as Marcus Chen, not as some billionaire or CEO, but simply as your husband, as our child's father, as a man who finally understands what matters." He opened the box. Inside was not some massive diamond screaming wealth or status, but a simple, elegant solitaire. Classic, modest, timeless, exactly like Sophia. "Sophia Mendes," his voice cracked slightly, "will you marry me?" Tears instantly pooled in Sophia's eyes. And for a moment, she said nothing, letting the full weight of it wash over her. This wasn't just a proposal. This was a man offering his entire soul. Finally, with a soft, trembling laugh, she whispered, "Yeah." Marcus exhaled sharply, a laugh of relief breaking through his own tears. His hands trembled as he gently slid the ring onto her finger. Sophia pulled him into her arms, holding him close as both of them wept. Not for sadness, but for the beauty of what they had rebuilt. A love stronger than lies, stronger than fear. And as they stayed there, tangled together on that old porch swing beneath a wide Texas sky, the baby shifted gently inside her, as if even he understood the sacredness of the moment. 2 weeks later, their wedding took place in the small white chapel at the edge of town. The decorations were simple, wildflowers from the fields, hand-tied by the mining crew. Grandma Maria baked the cake herself, while Joel, Carla, and Tonino handled everything from chairs to music. No media, no headlines, no fortune. Just family, just love. Sophia walked down the aisle in a simple, flowing ivory dress that hugged her rounded belly gracefully. She wore no veil, no diamonds. Only a small necklace that had once belonged to her mother. Marcus stood at the altar, eyes filled with wonder as he watched the woman who had changed the entire course of his life walk toward him. The pastor smiled gently as the two stood face to face. "Do you, Marcus, take Sophia as your wife, to love, to honor, and to walk beside her in every season of life?" Marcus's voice was thick but clear. "I do. And you, Sophia, take Marcus, to love, to forgive, and to walk beside him in wealth and in poverty, in honesty and in grace." Tears ran freely down Sophia's cheeks. "I do." The pastor smiled warmly. "Then by the power vested in me, I pronounce you husband and wife. You may kiss the bride." Marcus didn't wait. He leaned in, kissing Sophia softly, reverently, as the small crowd erupted into quiet cheers and joyful tears. As their lips met, neither of them heard the whispers of the past anymore, only the quiet pulse of their future, beating softly beneath the sound of their hearts. Later that night, as the party wound down, Marcus and Sophia sat together on the old swing outside, hand in hand, while Grandma Maria rocked quietly nearby, humming. Sophia rested her head on his shoulder. "We did it." Marcus smiled. "We did." Then, softly, she whispered, "And soon, we meet him." Her hand moved gently over her belly, where their son stirred, as if already ready to join this beautiful, imperfect, precious world they had fought to create. Marcus kissed her forehead. "I can't wait." Chapter 10. Full circle, the family they built. The early hours of the morning were still and heavy when Sophia jolted upright in bed, gripping Marcus's arm. "Marcus," she gasped. "It's time." For a split second, Marcus blinked through the fog of sleep, confused. Then realization hit him like a bolt of electricity. He shot up from the bed, wide-eyed, half-panicked. Time? Now? Are you sure? Do we have time to… Oh, God. Okay. Sophia breathed through another contraction, gripping his hand. You're panicking more than me, babe. Marcus scrambled to grab the hospital bag. I've got the bag, the keys, the what else? What else? Sophia laughed softly through her pain. Marcus. He paused, trying to breathe. Just drive. The ride to the hospital was a blur of flashing streetlights and nervous small talk, as Marcus gripped the steering wheel, sneaking glances at Sophia every few seconds. You're doing great, he said, mostly to himself. Everything's fine, breathing. Right, inhale, exhale. Marcus, Sophia groaned through a contraction. Less talking, more driving. Yes, ma'am, he said, pressing gently on the gas. Hours later, after long waves of pain, deep breaths, and whispered words of encouragement, the moment arrived. With one final push, a piercing cry filled the delivery room. A nurse gently placed the small, wriggling, red-faced baby onto Sophia's chest. Their son, tiny fingers flexed, searching instinctively for comfort as his mother wept softly, whispering, "Hi, baby. Hi, my sweet boy." Marcus stood beside them, tears falling freely as he watched Sophia cradle their newborn son like the most fragile, precious treasure on earth. He's perfect, Marcus whispered. He's absolutely perfect. Sophia smiled up at him, exhausted and glowing. Say hello to your dad, little one. Marcus leaned closer, brushing his lips against the baby's forehead, his voice breaking. Hi, buddy. I'm here. And I promise I will always be here. Their son squirmed slightly, as if acknowledging his father's voice. The moment held them there, suspended, sacred, as though time itself had paused to honor the start of a new life. They named him Miguel, a simple name, not after wealth, not after power, but after Sophia's father, the man who taught her how to build something real. The first few months of parenthood were a beautiful kind of chaos. Sleepless nights, diapers, late-night feedings, and hours spent just staring at their son in awe. Marcus learned how to swaddle, how to hold a bottle at just the right angle, how to function on 3 hours of sleep, and he loved every minute of it. Who knew billionaires could master diaper changes? Sophia teased one night as Miguel drifted off in his arms. Marcus smiled, looking down at his son's peaceful face. Turns out love makes you pretty good at everything. Their home wasn't a mansion, it was a small, modest house not far from the mining site, filled with the aroma of Sophia's cooking, the creak of Grandma Maria's rocker, and the tiny squeaks of Miguel's baby giggles. They lived simply, intentionally, and they were happy. 6 months after Miguel's birth, they gathered on the same porch where Marcus had once proposed, but now with a full house. Grandma Maria was baking pies in the kitchen, while Joel, Carla, Tonino, and the entire mining crew visited, bringing gifts and laughter. Even Isabella had returned. After her conviction, she had faced her consequences, fines, probation, and public shame. But Marcus, with Sophia's encouragement, had offered her something far harder to accept. A second chance. Now Isabella sat quietly beside the porch swing, watching Miguel with soft, tear-filled eyes. "May I hold him?" she asked softly. Sophia smiled gently, passing the baby into Isabella's arms. Miguel cooed, tugging lightly at Isabella's sleeve. Isabella's voice cracked. "You're so beautiful, little one." Marcus sat beside her, his voice calm but kind. "You've come a long way, Isabella." "So have you," she whispered. "You found what we all pretended we didn't need." Marcus smiled. "I found who I needed." She looked at Sophia then, her former rival, her former enemy, and whispered, "Thank you for forgiving me." Sophia nodded softly. For Miguel's sake, for all our sakes, it was time. As the sun dipped lower, painting the sky with shades of pink and gold, Marcus sat on the porch with his wife, his son sleeping peacefully against his chest. The house was filled with laughter, the smell of fresh pie, the buzz of cicadas, simple sounds, yet to Marcus, richer than any luxury he had ever known. Sophia leaned against him, her hand tracing lazy circles across his arm. "Do you ever regret any of it?" she whispered. He thought for a moment. The lies, yes. The pain, yes. Then he turned toward her, voice low, eyes full. "But losing everything? Walking away from the fortune, the company, the expectations? Never. Because all of that led me here. To you. To him." Sophia smiled softly, her eyes glistening. "To us," she whispered. Marcus kissed her gently. "To us. Forever." In that simple home with their family gathered and their son sleeping safe and warm against his chest, Marcus Chen, once the untouchable billionaire, finally understood. True wealth was never what you built. It was who you built it with. The world may remember Marcus Chen as the billionaire who gave away his fortune. The headlines will tell you about the CEO who left his empire behind, who walked away from boardrooms, private jets, and power. But that's not the real story. The real story is far quieter. Much simpler. It's about a man who spent years pretending to be important, pretending to be whole, until one woman showed him that love was never something you could buy or hide behind. It's about a woman named Sophia, who didn't see a billionaire when she first met him. She saw a man. A man with soft hands, unsure words, and honest eyes, even when wrapped in lies. She saw not his wealth, but his heart. And when the truth unraveled, when everything threatened to fall apart, it wasn't money that saved them. It was grace, forgiveness, courage to trust again. The quiet kind of love that doesn't shout but stays. That forgives not because it forgets, but because it believes people can grow. In the end, Marcus lost everything the world said mattered. But what he gained was far greater. A small house filled with laughter. A porch swing beneath Texas stars. A wife who chose him not for his last name, but for his heart. And a son who would one day grow up knowing that sometimes the greatest kind of strength is not never falling, but learning how to rise again. And maybe that's what love really is. Not perfection, not grand gestures, but quiet, steady hands reaching for each other again and again, even after the storms. What did you think of Marcus and Sophia's journey? Share your thoughts in the comments. If you've ever experienced a love that grew stronger after mistakes, we invite you to tell your story below. And if you believe in second chances, in love that endures, don't forget to rate this story from 0 to 10. Thank you for staying with us until the very end. And remember, sometimes you have to lose everything to finally find everything that matters.